Isn't it wild how much advice is out there these days? Like, you can't even open a tea bag without being told how to live your best life.
Seriously. It feels like swimming in this massive ocean of self-help,
Yeah.
and you're just trying to grab onto something solid.
Yeah, totally. It reminds me of that Borges story,
Yeah.
the Library of Babel. But instead of books, it's just endless, like, blog posts and calendar pages telling us how to be happy.
That's a great way to put it. We're definitely not short on opinions about happiness and meaning. The real trick is figuring out what actually holds up, what's backed by, real evidence and maybe some older wisdom too.
Which is exactly what we're diving into today. We're trying to cut through all that noise, get to the core of happiness and meaning, and we're using Jonathan Haidt's The Happiness Hypothesis as our guide.
Right. Think of it as getting the essential nuggets, the stuff that really seems to matter, without getting lost in all the fluff.
Yeah, the cliches. So our mission here is basically to understand what helps us as humans really flourish. And also what trips us up. What obstacles do we put in our own way?
And why do some people seem to find that deep sense of purpose, while
Yeah.
others really struggle with that? What's so great about Haidt's book is how he weaves together these ancient ideas with modern science, psychology, neuroscience, the whole lot.
Exactly. It's not just one perspective. And we'll touch on some big ideas like this concept of our minds being divided.
The rider and the elephant.
Yeah, and how crucial relationships are, this tricky thing called adaptation, virtue.
hmm
Is that still a thing?
He argues it is, yeah, in a specific way.
Okay, and that big search for meaning. So let's jump in with that first one, the divided self, that metaphor you mentioned.
Okay, yeah, the divided self. So the main image Haidt uses, which is really sticky, is the rider on the elephant. The rider is your conscious mind, the rational bit that makes plans, weighs pros and cons. But the elephant,
Yeah.
that's your emotions, your gut feelings, all those automatic responses, the big, powerful part that often seems to just go where it wants.
Totally resonates. You feel that struggle sometimes, right? Your rational brain says get up early, but the elephant just wants to hit snooze.
Exactly. And it's not a brand new idea, is it? You mentioned Plato.
Yeah, Plato had his chariot, right? The charioteer trying to control these two horses, one noble, one less so.
And Freud, of course. His ego trying to manage the id's impulses and the superego's rules. That internal conflict is a recurring theme.
It really is. We all know that feeling. You resolve to eat healthy,
Uh-huh.
and then someone brings donuts into the office. Suddenly, the writer's arguments about long-term health seem pretty weak compared to the elephant's desire for sugar.
That's the elephant taking the reins. And modern neuroscience actually gives us a clearer picture of why this happens. Gazzaniga's split brain studies are fascinating here.
Oh yeah, where they cut the connection between the two halves of the brain.
Exactly.
Mm.
And by showing information to only one hemisphere, they found the brain isn't one unified thing. It's more like a collection of specialized modules.
And the interpreter.
Right, the interpreter module, usually in the left hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
This part is basically a storyteller. It watches what the rest of the brain and body are doing, and it just makes up a plausible explanation for why.
Like in that experiment with the pictures, chicken claw and snow scene.
Yeah. The right brain saw the snow scene and pointed to a shovel. The left brain saw the chicken claw and pointed to a chicken. When asked why he pointed to the shovel, the left brain, which didn't see the snow scene, didn't say, I don't know. It just confabulated, oh, you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed.
Wow. So the writer is often just rationalizing after the fact, making up stories to explain what the elephant already did.
Pretty much. It shakes up that old idea of pure reason sitting up front, calmly directing everything. Haidt calls that the Promethean script, this view of logic being firmly in charge.
But it's more complicated. Emotion isn't just this, like, primitive thing reason has to suppress.
No, not at all.
Huh.
Look at the orbitofrontal cortex. It's heavily involved in emotional reactions, figuring out rewards and punishments. It's maybe a better candidate for Freud's eye than some deep hidden part of the brain.
And Damasio's work, showing that if you damage those emotional centers, your reasoning actually breaks down.
Crucial point. People with that kind of damage can analyze problems logically, but they can't make decisions. They can list pros and cons endlessly, but can't feel which option is better. Emotion is essential for practical reason.
So the elephant isn't just raw power, it's also providing, like, gut-level appraisals, saying, this feels good or this feels dangerous.
Exactly. It rapidly assesses possibilities, often giving us a feeling about the best option before the rider even engages. Then the rider, the conscious reasoning, steps in to analyze, especially when the options feel pretty balanced.
Which brings us to automatic versus controlled processing. We like to think we're in control, using that slow, deliberate thinking.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Most of what our brain does is automatic, fast, unconscious, handling millions of bits of information. Controlled processing is slow, takes effort. We can only really focus on one thing at a time.
So the writer isn't the CEO, maybe more like a press secretary, trying to make sense of the CEO's decisions.
That's a good way to think about it. It backs up what the philosopher David Hume said centuries ago. Reason is, and ought only to be the slave of the passions. The writer serves the elephant, mostly.
Think about long-term goals versus temptation. My writer wants to save money, but my elephant sees that shiny new gadget.
Right. The automatic system loves immediate rewards, dopamine hits related to food, sex, novelty. The control system, the writer, can think about the future, about abstract goals, but its power to actually override the elephant in the moment is, well, it's limited.
So if the elephant is so powerful, how do we ever change? How do we reach those goals? That seems like the million-dollar question.
It is, and it leads us into thinking about perspective and how we can influence the elephant even if we can't directly control it.
Okay, because we all have those thoughts we don't want, right? Like in Poe's story, The Imp of the Perverse, this urge to do the exact wrong thing.
Yes. That feeling of battling an internal impulse, that's the writer wrestling with the elephant. But the writer isn't powerless. Perspective matters hugely.
Like the story of Boethius in prison.
Exactly. Lady Philosophy visits him. She can't change his external situation. He's still locked up. But she works on his perspective.
Yeah.
She reminds him that fortune changes, that his family is still valuable, that adversity can actually make you stronger. She reframes his whole experience, pointing out that nothing is miserable unless you think it's so. She's talking directly to the writer, trying to change how he interprets the elephant's feelings of despair.
But just telling the writer isn't enough, right? We said the elephant needs retraining.
Crucially, yes, conscious insight alone rarely leads to lasting change. You need to retrain the elephant's automatic reactions. This is why many effective self-help or therapy approaches involve changing behaviors consistently over time. You're gradually nudging the elephant onto a new path.
And our elephants come preloaded with certain tendencies, don't they? Like that, O-meter.
Oh, yeah. We have this instant, automatic, positive or negative reaction to almost everything we encounter. Even things shown so quickly we don't consciously register them can prime our feelings.
And that weird research about names. People named Dennis being more likely to become dentists.
Pelham's work, yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds strange, but there's evidence we have a subtle bias towards things that resemble us, even our names. It suggests these automatic, non-conscious pulls can influence big life choices.
Wild. And then there's the big one, negativity bias.
Right. Bad is stronger than good. Negative events, negative feedback, negative emotions, they grab our attention and stick with us much more powerfully than positive ones.
The snake in the grass example. You react instantly, right? Fear first, questions later.
Exactly. That's the elephant reacting to potential danger. It's an evolutionary advantage, obviously, to be highly sensitive to threats.
And this is linked to the amygdala.
Yes, the amygdala is key in processing threats and fear. But it doesn't just trigger fight or flight. It also influences our thinking. When we're afraid, it sends signals that make us more vigilant, more likely to interpret ambiguous things as threats. When angry, we might see insults everywhere. The elephant colors the writer's perceptions.
And on top of all that, we have our genes.
Can't forget genetics. Twin studies are pretty clear. Genes play a big role in our basic temperament, our personality traits, even our baseline level of happiness.
So it's not a blank slate. Our elephant comes with factory settings.
Sort of. But genes aren't destiny. They're more like a recipe that interacts constantly with our experiences and environment. Still, understanding these built-in tendencies, the biases, the genetic leanings, is crucial if we want to work with the elephant, not just fight it fruitlessly.
Okay, so the elephant is strong, biased, partly genetic, but not untamable. What tools does the writer have to actually, guide it, nudge it?
Well, one very powerful set of tools comes from cognitive therapy, especially the work of Aaron Beck. He focused on depression initially.
And the idea is to change your thoughts.
Specifically, to identify and challenge those automatic negative thoughts that fuel bad moods. Beck talked about the cognitive triad in depression. Negative thoughts about yourself, I am worthless, the world, everything is terrible, and the future, it's hopeless.
Right. And cognitive therapy teaches you to catch those thoughts.
Exactly. To recognize them as thoughts, not necessarily facts, and then to evaluate them. Like, is there evidence for this? Is there another way to see this? He identified common distortions like personalization, blaming yourself for things outside your control.
Like the parent whose kid falls and they think it's all my fault.
Yes, cognitive therapy helps the writer challenge those kinds of automatic, often unfair thoughts, which can then gradually change the elephant's emotional response.
Okay, so that's working directly with the writer's thinking. What about more? Direct interventions on the elephant.
Well, there are medications, of course. Antidepressants like Prozac, which are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
How do they work? Do we know?
We know they increase the levels of serotonin, a neurotransmitter, in the brain. The exact mechanism of how that lifts mood is still debated, honestly. But for many people, they seem to shift the elephant's baseline state, making it less reactive to negative triggers, maybe like putting on slightly rose-colored glasses.
So changing the brain chemistry to influence the emotional tone.
Right. It's another way to influence the elephant, working from the bottom up, so to speak, rather than top down like cognitive therapy.
And Haidt also mentioned something more intuitive, the body as a temple.
Yes, this idea that we have an innate moral intuition, that our bodies are somehow sacred or special, it helps explain why people can have strong negative reactions to things that seem harmless logically, like certain taboo acts involving the body or even body modifications. It hints at a kind of vertical spiritual dimension we might perceive.
So different approaches, changing thoughts, changing brain chemistry, maybe tapping into deeper intuitions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Buddha said you need a method to tame the elephant. Meditation is one ancient method. Cognitive therapy and Prozac are two modern ones. They all aim, in different ways, to bring the rider and elephant into better alignment. None is necessarily better. Different methods might work for different people or different problems.
Okay, that makes sense. But our happiness isn't just about our internal state, right? We keep bumping up against the importance of other people.
Absolutely fundamental. Haidt calls us ultra-social. Unlike most animals, we live in these huge cooperative societies, often with people we aren't related to. From a simple evolutionary view focused on individual survival, that's kind of puzzling.
Yeah, you'd expect more competition, less helping strangers.
Well, we do have kin altruism, the drive to help our relatives who share our genes. That explains cooperation in families and small groups.
Makes sense. Protect the gene pool.
Right. But for cooperation on a larger scale, with non-relatives, we need something else. And that seems to be reciprocity, the tit-for-tat principle. You start by cooperating, and then you basically mirror what the other person does. If they cooperate, you keep cooperating. If they defect, you defect. It allows trust and cooperation to emerge, even among strangers.
And gossip plays a role in this. Seems counterintuitive.
Haidt argues it's actually a crucial social tool. Gossip, especially about moral behavior, who's cheating, who's trustworthy, who's being selfish, helps us enforce social norms. It extends our ability to track reputations beyond our direct experience. It's like an informal policing system, and it also helps bond people who share the same judgments.
Okay, so it's not just malicious talk. It can serve a group function. But our social lives aren't always harmonious. We're constantly comparing ourselves, aren't we?
Oh, constantly. And we have these strong self-serving biases. We want to present ourselves in the best possible light. Research consistently shows we tend to overestimate our own positive qualities, how fair, kind, or competent we are compared to how we rate others.
Like those studies where almost everyone rates themselves as above average.
Exactly. Or the Cornell studies. He mentions people predicting they'd buy a charity flower but then not doing it, or overestimating how much they'd cooperate in a game compared to their actual behavior. We're pretty good at seeing others' flaws, much less good at seeing our own.
And this connects to naive realism.
Yes, this is the pervasive belief that we see the world exactly as it is, objectively, and therefore anyone who sees it differently must be biased, irrational, or ill-informed.
Which makes it super hard to see our own biases.
Extremely hard. Think about arguments with roommates about chores. Everyone genuinely feels they do more than their fair share because we pay more attention to our own efforts and contributions than to others. Our perspective feels like reality.
And this definitely fuels conflict, that idea of the myth of pure evil.
Baumeister's concept, yeah. In conflicts, we tend to see ourselves as purely virtuous victims, and the other side as purely evil perpetrators with malicious motives.
But reality is usually way messier.
Much messier. It's often a cycle of misunderstanding, perceived insults, defensiveness, and self-justification on both sides. Even if one side bears more responsibility, the pure evil narrative is almost always an oversimplification driven by our own biases.
So if we want to handle disagreements better, what's the advice?
It's tough, but Haidt suggests deliberately looking for your own contribution to the conflict. Ask yourself, how might I be wrong? What part did I play? Even if you think you're 90% right, focusing on your 10% can drastically reduce your anger and defensiveness and open the door to understanding the other person's perspective. It's about trying to step outside your own naive realism.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's talk directly about happiness. What actually makes us happy, according to the research Haidt reviews?
Well, one maybe surprising finding is the progress principle. We often get more pleasure, more positive feeling from making progress towards a goal than from actually achieving it.
Huh, like the journey is more satisfying than the destination?
In many ways, yes. Shakespeare said, "Things won are done. Joy's soul lies in the doing." Once you get the thing you wanted, the pleasure often fades quicker than you expect.
Which leads right into the adaptation principle, doesn't it? The hedonic treadmill.
Exactly. This is a really big one. We adapt to changes in our circumstances, both good and bad. We have a sort of baseline happiness level influenced by genetics and personality, and major events might temporarily bump us up or down, but we tend to drift back towards that baseline over time.
The classic examples being lottery winners and people who become paralyzed.
Right. Studies show that after an initial period of euphoria or devastation, both groups tend to return much closer to their previous happiness levels than people predict. We're bad at effective forecasting, predicting how future events will make us feel and for how long. Stephen Hawking put it beautifully. My expectations were reduced to zero. Everything since has been a bonus.
So if we adapt to almost everything, does anything external have a lasting impact on happiness? Are we just stuck on this treadmill?
Not entirely. Haidt highlights certain external conditions, the C in his happiness formula, that seem harder to adapt to and can have a more lasting negative impact.
Like what?
Things like chronic noise, a long and unpleasant commute, a perceived lack of control over your life, feeling shame, and critically the quality and security of your relationships. These are things that can persistently drag down well-being because we don't fully adapt to them.
So fixing a bad commute might actually boost happiness more permanently than getting a raise you'll just adapt to.
Potentially, yes. It's about focusing on removing those chronic negative conditions rather than just chasing fleeting pleasures.
And how can we get more mileage out of the good stuff if we adapt so quickly?
Two main strategies, savoring and variety. Savoring means consciously paying attention to and appreciating positive experiences, really tasting your food, focusing on a beautiful sunset, lingering on a compliment. Variety means seeking out different kinds of positive experiences, because novelty helps counteract adaptation.
Like trying new foods or activities instead of always doing the same thing?
Exactly. Compare maybe the French approach of smaller portions savored slowly versus a more American tendency towards huge portions consumed quickly. Savoring and variety fight the treadmill effect.
Haidt also distinguishes between pleasures and gratifications, right?
Yes, this is really important. Pleasures are those sensory delights. Food, sex, comfort. They feel good, but are usually short-lived. Gratifications are activities that fully engage our strengths and skills, where we might lose ourselves in the moment, what Csikszentmihalyi calls flow.
Like playing music, working on a challenging project, having a deep conversation.
Right. These gratifications often don't involve intense pleasure during the activity. Sometimes they're effortful, but they lead to a deeper, more lasting sense of satisfaction and fulfillment afterwards. They contribute much more to long-term happiness than chasing fleeting pleasures.
That classroom example was great. The mood boost from eating ice cream faded fast, but the boost from doing acts of kindness or writing gratitude letters lasted much longer.
Because those were likely gratifications, engaging different parts of ourselves.
It makes you think about luxury fever, as Robert Frank calls it. We chase material goods we adapt to.
Instead of investing in things like shorter commutes, more time for relationships, or pursuing activities that provide gratification.
And Barry Schwartz's paradox of choice, having too many options, can actually make us less happy.
Yeah, it can lead to paralysis, higher expectations, and more potential for regret about the choices we didn't make. Sometimes fewer options can be freeing.
So, putting it all together, Haidt proposes a kind of happiness formula, right? H equals S plus C plus V.
Well, he uses it to structure the discussion. S is your biological set point. C is the conditions of your life, those less adaptable factors. And V is voluntary activities, the choices you make, like pursuing gratifications, savoring, etc.
But he also frames it as a balance, like yin and yang. Happiness comes partly from within.
Like the Buddhist approach of taming the mind, working on your set point and reactions.
And partly from without, engaging with the world, improving conditions, choosing voluntary activities that bring meaning. It's not just one or the other.
Exactly. It's about finding that dynamic balance between internal work and external engagement.
Okay, we keep coming back to relationships as being crucial in that conditions part of happiness, but they seem even deeper than just a condition.
Oh, absolutely. They are fundamental to our very being. Think about Harlow's monkey experiments back in the 50s.
The wire mother and the cloth mother.
Yes, baby monkeys were separated from their mothers and given two surrogates, one made of wire that provided milk, and one covered in soft cloth that offered no food.
And they preferred the cloth one, right? Even though it didn't feed them.
Overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
they clung to the cloth mother for comfort and security, only going to the wire mother briefly to feed. It powerfully demonstrated that our need for contact comfort, for attachment, is incredibly deep-seated, perhaps even more primary than the need for nourishment, at least psychologically.
That's striking. And Bowlby built on this with attachment theory.
Right. John Bowlby proposed that infants have an innate behavioral system designed to keep them safe by maintaining proximity to their caregivers. It's about balancing the need for safety with the drive to explore the world. He described it like an internal thermostat. When danger feels high, the need for closeness goes up. When things feel safe, the child feels free to explore.
And Mary Ainsworth's strange situation research showed different patterns of this.
Yes. By observing infants' reactions to brief separations from and reunions with their mothers, she identified distinct attachment styles. Secure, distressed by separation but easily soothed on reunion, using the mother as a secure base. Avoidant, showing little distress at separation and avoiding contact on reunion. And anxious resistant, very distressed by separation but ambivalent or resistant to comfort on reunion. These patterns reflected the history of the caregiver's responsiveness.
And these childhood patterns, they stick with us.
Research suggests they form internal working models of relationships that influence our expectations and behaviors in later relationships, including romantic ones. Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver extended attachment theory to adult love.
So.
They argue that romantic partners in adulthood often come to serve the same functions as attachment figures in childhood, providing a sense of security, safe haven, a base from which to explore the world, secure base, maintaining proximity and causing distress upon separation. The attachment system gets repurposed for adult pair bonds.
So love isn't just one thing. It involves these deep attachment needs.
It seems adult love integrates at least three biological systems: the attachment system, bonding, security; the caregiving system, looking after the partner; and the mating system, sexual desire. Different hormones like oxytocin for bonding and vasopressin seem involved in knitting these together.
And there's an evolutionary logic to men sticking around.
Yes. Given how dependent human infants are, men who formed stable pair bonds and invested in their offspring likely had greater reproductive success over time compared to those who didn't. Pair bonding seems to be a human adaptation.
But we often distinguish between different kinds of love, right? Like passionate versus companionate.
Exactly. Passionate love is that intense, often overwhelming state of longing, infatuation, and sexual desire, typical early in a relationship. Companionate love is the affection, trust, intimacy, and commitment that often develops over time in stable, long-term relationships.
And passionate love, it doesn't last forever at that peak intensity.
Biologically, it seems impossible. That constant neurochemical high isn't sustainable. While passion can certainly persist or reemerge in long relationships, the foundation of lasting love tends to shift towards the deeper connection of companionate love. Haidt uses a graph analogy: passionate love spikes early and then often declines, while companionate love tends to grow steadily over time.
And the overall impact of having strong relationships, it's huge for well-being.
Massive. Decades of research confirm it. Strong social connections are linked to better physical health, longer lifespan, faster recovery from illness, and significantly lower rates of depression and anxiety. Durkheim showed this over a century ago with suicide rates. It's one of the most robust findings in social science.
And giving support is maybe even better than getting it.
Some fascinating recent research suggests that, actively supporting others seems to have profound benefits for our own health and happiness. We are truly built for connection and mutual care.
And facing difficult times, relationships play a key role there too.
Adversity often acts like a filter. It can strain weak relationships, but significantly deepen strong ones. Going through hardship together, offering and receiving support, builds incredible bonds. Greg's story in the book about how a crisis led him to reevaluate his life and connect more deeply with family and community. It shows how adversity, mediated by strong relationships, can actually lead to growth and a changed perspective on what truly matters.
Which brings us nicely to that whole idea of finding meaning, especially through difficulty.
Right. the idea of post-traumatic growth. While trauma can obviously be devastating, Haidt discusses the surprising finding that many people report positive psychological changes following adversity.
Like what kind of changes?
Generally, three main areas. First, a reappraisal of life, maybe a greater appreciation for small things, changed priorities. Second, stronger relationships, feeling closer to those who provided support. And third, a changed sense of self, perhaps feeling stronger, more resilient, or developing a deeper philosophy of life.
It's not saying the trauma was good, but that growth can come from it.
Exactly. It's the what doesn't kill me makes me stronger idea, but with more nuance. The Dalai Lama talks about hardship developing inner strength. And you see historical examples like King Ashoka supposedly transformed by the carnage of a battle he won, leading him to embrace Buddhism and nonviolence.
Is there a specific time when this growth is more likely?
Haidt suggests there's often a window of opportunity, shortly after a traumatic event. People might be more shaken up, more open to questioning their assumptions and values. If they actively work through the experience and make changes during this period, the growth is more likely to stick.
And how we make sense of it, our story matters.
Hugely. Dan McAdams' work on narrative identity is key here. We understand our lives as stories. Adversity provides dramatic tension, turning points. People who find meaning often craft stories where they overcame challenges, learned valuable lessons, and were changed for the better. He talks about the commitment story, common among highly generative adults, stories involving early advantages, awareness of suffering, a stable belief system, and overcoming obstacles.
Writing about trauma helps create that story.
James Pennebaker's research is fascinating. He found that writing about traumatic experiences, especially over several days, leads to improvements in physical and mental health. It's not just venting. It seems the key is constructing a coherent narrative, making sense of the event, finding meaning in it over time.
And adolescence and early adulthood seem like really important times for the story making.
Definitely. That's when our identities are really forming. And major life events during that period can become foundational chapters in our life story.
And again, social support is critical.
Absolutely. Glenn Elder's studies of people who lived through the Great Depression show that those with strong social networks and community involvement fared much better psychologically. Social integration acts as a powerful buffer against adversity and helps people maintain a sense of meaning.
It makes you think, we want to shield our kids from all hardship, but maybe we're robbing them of chances to build resilience and learn life's deeper lessons.
It's a tough balance, isn't it? There's certainly worldly wisdom in the idea that experience, including making mistakes and overcoming challenges, is often the best teacher.
So finding meaning isn't just about overcoming big traumas, it's also about how we live day to day, like Franklin's Virtue Project.
Yes, Ben Franklin's methodical attempt to cultivate virtues like temperance, order, and humility is a great example of consciously trying to train the elephant, his habits and character, to align with the writer's values. It's about building a life of meaning through deliberate practice.
And ancient wisdom often focused on this too, right? Linking happiness to virtue.
Very much so. Think of the Egyptian sage Amenepi or the biblical Proverbs. They emphasize inner qualities, contentment, honesty, prudence over external wealth or status. Their method was often using maxims, stories, and role models to evoke emotional responses, aiming to shape the elephant directly.
But modern ethics kind of shifted away from that focus on character.
Haidt argues that Western moral philosophy, especially since Kant and Bentham, became more focused on reasoning through moral dilemmas, quandary ethics, rather than cultivating good character virtue ethics. He thinks this narrowed morality and made it less effective at guiding behavior.
So the virtue hypothesis revisited is that cultivating virtue, seen broadly as excellences of character, is intrinsically rewarding. It leads to flourishing.
Yes, that's the idea. Not just being good in a narrow sense, but developing strengths that allow you to live well and contribute meaningfully.
And sometimes a really strong emotional reaction can help align the writer and elephant on values. You mentioned becoming vegetarian.
Yeah, that was a personal example in the book where seeing something deeply disturbing, the reality of a slaughterhouse, created such a strong visceral reaction, disgust, pity, that it instantly aligned the elephant with the writer's previously weaker belief that eating meat was wrong. The emotional jolt led to lasting behavioral change where reasoning alone hadn't.
So emotion can be a powerful engine for moral action.
Definitely. And thinking about virtues, Chris Peterson and Martin Seligman tried to create a more scientific classification. They looked across cultures and history and identified 6 core virtues found almost everywhere: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence.
And under each virtue, there are specific character strengths.
Right. Like under wisdom, you have curiosity, love of learning, judgment, creativity, perspective. Under humanity, kindness, love, social intelligence. The idea is that cultivating these strengths is a pathway to living a virtuous and fulfilling life. It provides a positive framework, focusing on strengths rather than just weaknesses.
What about that belief some people have in, like, cosmic justice, karma?
Haidt touches on the childhood belief in imminent justice, the idea that bad deeds will automatically lead to punishment. He suggests this might be a cognitive default that persists for some into adulthood, perhaps fueling beliefs in karma or divine reward and punishment, providing a sense of moral order in the universe.
And interestingly, happiness might actually cause good behavior sometimes.
Alice Eason's research showed that when people are put in a good mood, like finding a coin, they're more likely to be helpful and kind afterwards. So while virtue can lead to happiness, happiness might also make it easier to be virtuous. It can be a positive upward spiral.
And later in life, meaning often comes from contributing to others. Generativity.
Yes, Erik Erikson's stage of generativity versus stagnation. In midlife and beyond, finding meaning often involves investing in the next generation, mentoring, contributing to society, leaving a positive legacy. It shifts the focus beyond the self.
Haidt seems a bit concerned that modern society has lost a shared sense of these virtues.
He suggests that compared to earlier eras or other cultures, modern Western society might lack a rich, widely shared ethos, a common understanding of virtues, values, and how to live well. He thinks maybe some level of shared values and constraints can actually be beneficial for collective well-being, even if it clashes with our emphasis on individual freedom and diversity.
Which touches on that paradox of diversity celebrating difference while also needing some common ground.
It's a real tension.
Yeah.
How do we build cohesive, meaningful communities while respecting deep differences in values?
Now, you mentioned transcendence as one of the core virtues. This gets into that vertical dimension.
Yes. Haidt argues that humans often perceive a vertical dimension to life. Noble versus base, sacred versus profane, divine versus animalistic, even if they don't believe in God. Uses the flatland analogy. Maybe we're like two-dimensional beings, mostly unaware of a third dimension of spiritual or moral elevation.
And the emotion of disgust plays a role here.
He argues disgust, originally related to avoiding physical contamination, spoiled food, bodily waste, got co-opted to support moral judgments, particularly those related to purity, divinity, and avoiding degradation or animality. You see this in purity codes in many religions and cultures.
But there are positive emotions related to this dimension too, elevation and awe.
Absolutely. Elevation is that warm, uplifting feeling you get when witnessing an act of moral beauty or great virtue. It makes you want to be a better person yourself. Thomas Jefferson described it beautifully. Awe is that sense of wonder and smallness you feel in the presence of something vast, powerful, or beautiful, nature, art, a great leader, a profound idea.
And awe makes us feel smaller.
Yes, it often diminishes the focus on the individual self and connects us to something larger. Kant and Darwin both wrote about it. Maslow called experiences that trigger awe peak experiences, often feeling mystical or self-transcendent.
So the sense of divinity or transcendence often involves getting beyond the self.
That's a common theme, yes. The small, selfish self is often seen as an obstacle to experiencing this higher dimension or achieving spiritual goals.
Okay, so bringing it all together, the meaning of life. Big question.
Haidt wisely separates two questions. One is the external question, why are we here? What's the purpose of the universe? That's probably beyond science. The other is internal and empirical. How can I find meaning and purpose in my life? Psychology can actually study that.
And work is a big part of where people find meaning or don't.
Definitely. Researchers distinguish between seeing work as a job, just for the paycheck, a career, a path for advancement, or a calling, work that feels intrinsically fulfilling and contributes to a greater good. People who see their work as a calling report much higher life satisfaction.
Like the hospital janitors who saw their work not just as cleaning, but as contributing to healing.
Exactly. They found meaning by connecting their tasks to a larger purpose. This relates to Csikszentmihalyi's idea of flow, being fully absorbed in challenging, skillful activity.
And vital engagement.
That's Csikszentmihalyi's term for applying flow to your life more broadly. It's a relationship to the world characterized by experiences of flow and subjective meaning, feeling connected to what you do, finding it purposeful. Like the horse rider Catherine described in the book, who felt completely alive and engaged when riding. It's the opposite of feeling alienated or just going through the motions.
So meaning seems to emerge when things connect up.
Yes, Haidt argues that a sense of meaning arises when your life feels coherent across different levels. Your own subjective experience, your relationships, and your connection to groups or causes larger than yourself. When these levels align and reinforce each other, life feels meaningful. Like the rituals in Puvanswar, India, connecting personal purity, social relationships, and the sacred.
And thinking about groups, how does morality and maybe even religion fit into our evolutionary story?
It's complex.
Yeah.
Pure genetic evolution struggles to explain large-scale altruism beyond kin. The idea of group selection groups, with more cooperative individuals outcompeting other groups, is controversial genetically. But Haidt favors a perspective that includes cultural evolution.
How does that work?
Beliefs, practices, and institutions can evolve culturally because they help groups succeed, even if they don't directly benefit individual genes. David Sloan Wilson argues religion might be a key group-level adaptation, promoting trust, cooperation, and self-sacrifice within the group, making that group more competitive against others.
Shared rituals play a big role in that.
Yes, shared rituals, singing, dancing, marching in unison, religious ceremonies seem incredibly powerful at dissolving individual boundaries and creating a sense of collective effervescence, a shared identity. William McNeill described this powerfully from his experience marching in the Army. It binds the group together.
So wrapping up, it seems like understanding happiness and meaning requires looking at ourselves, our relationships, and our place in larger groups, drawing on both ancient wisdom and modern science.
And recognizing that different perspectives, even those we disagree with, might hold valuable pieces of the puzzle. Like liberals, perhaps, focusing more on care and fairness. Conservatives, perhaps more on loyalty, authority, and sanctity. Seeking wisdom in opposing views can lead to a more complete understanding of this incredibly complex human experience.
Wow, that was quite the journey through the happiness hypothesis. We've gone from the writer trying to steer the elephant inside
To
us,
how we get stuck on and maybe jump off the hedonic treadmill.
the absolute necessity of strong relationships, and how adversity can, surprisingly, forge meaning.
And hopefully for you listening, some key things stand out. Maybe it's recognizing the sheer power of that elephant. Our emotions and intuitions in shaping our choices. It's not just about willpower.
Or maybe it's that adaptation principle. Knowing we adapt gives us clues, right? Focus on those chronic negative conditions, but also actively savor the good stuff and seek variety to keep things fresh.
For me, the recurring theme of connection to others, to meaningful activities, even to something larger than ourselves, feels incredibly central to a flourishing life.
So, as you go about your week, maybe mull this over. Thinking about your own writer and elephant, where could you apply a bit more understanding, maybe less judgment, towards your elephant's tendencies?
And considering adaptation, what's one small positive experience you could consciously savor this week? Or is there a gratification you could engage in, something that uses your strengths?
Yeah, how can you cultivate more of that vital engagement, that feeling of being truly connected and alive in what you do?
If this sparks your interest, definitely check out Jonathan Haidt's book, or explore the broader fields of positive psychology, the science of attachment, or the research on meaning and purpose. There's so much more to learn.
Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope it gave you some useful insights and maybe some things to think about. Until next time.